In this Roll for Crit review, we're taking a look at Printing Press, a spin-off of Portal Games' Gutenberg. Now, in this game, you'll be drafting cards, trying to lay them out on your tableau to get the perfect pattern, frame it, and get the most points within 3 rounds. But will this game leave enough of an imprint on your game night? Watch this review and find out. The game in this video was provided to Roll for Crit by its creators or publishers. Only the game was provided for the making of this video. In Printing Press, your goal is to get the most points over 3 rounds, doing so by drafting the way you get points through the frame and plate, and then drafting the cards that will actually earn you the points. Then, you'll add up all the points at the end of each round and see who is the winner. Now, before we begin, each player gets a unique character with their own unique power. All of them are basically one-time effects, as well as these 3 face-down tiles, which you can use to substitute a little bit later on. You also get these bonus tokens, which we'll get to a little bit later as well. Once everyone has their pieces, you can then begin with the first round of drafting. The first thing you're going to draft each round is a frame and a plate. This tells you how you're going to earn points that round. Usually, it will tell you to try and get certain symbols or possibly not have certain symbols on your final placement of the frame. Now, in order to choose the order of the draft, for the first round and possibly future rounds, it's going to be based on the number printed on your character. However, throughout the game, you'll be getting these cubes as well as symbols with cube card printed on them that increase your initiative value. So technically, the number's not your initiative. You start all with 0, with the numbers being tiebreakers. But if this character had this, that would be initiative of 3, which could possibly be the highest. If there's any ties again, you go back to the number printed on the character. After each player has a plate and frame, you'll then be able to start drafting the cards to build your tableau. However, there are a few more things I want to cover. First, every time you draft, including when you draft for the plate and frame, the person who picked last is going to get one of these black initiative cubes. That will move them up in terms of the initiative track order, meaning that you won't always be picking last in a round. Second, there's these symbols with dark circles around them. Whenever you hit one of those rounds, you're going to take one of the little bonus tiles here and cover one of the 2 circles here at the bottom of the current frame. This means at the end of the game, for every time that symbol appears in any one of your 3 frames, not just this one, you will get 2 points. Now, if on a previous round, let's say you had this frame and you also used that on the same symbol as before, instead of placing the 2, you place a 1, meaning you're going to have lower value for trying to stack all in on one symbol. Now that we've gone over all that, let's actually talk about drafting the cards that will help you get those points. Now, cards will come in a vertical or horizontal orientation, and you're going to have to keep them that way. It'll be based on a number printed in the corner. So if I were to take this, I cannot add this to my tableau that way. The first one you take can go anywhere. Afterwards, let's say we got 4 new cards laid out. The next ones will have to be placed in such a way that it touches the previous card. It can go any way. In fact, could even cover up the card if, let's say, we really wanted that eye but didn't care about the other symbols there. Now, that black cube there is the same as the ones that will be dealt out at the end of each draft, meaning that if you add that to your tableau, it increases your initiative value. You're going to repeat this drafting 5 to 6 times, slowly building out your preferred tableau, trying to match the goals in the corner there. Now, whenever you take a card, you do have the option to not add it to your tableau. Instead of adding it there, you can discard it and draw from this bag of tiles. If you do, you will draw 3 tiles, choosing 1 to add to your tableau. All tiles have a black cube on the back if you want to add that instead, but more often than not, maybe you're just trying to fill in that final little hole there. You can also at any time add one of the 3 tiles that you were given at the start of the game, but you will not replenish this, so these 3 tiles are all you're going to have for all 3 rounds of the game. Once you've reached the moment to draft all your cards, you're then going to take your frame and lock it in. You can place it anywhere you want, but only the things that are in the frame will count towards scoring. So if you really wanted to make sure, for example, that dark gray ink drop was on the left, I'd put it over here, which probably wasn't the best layout. However, this does give you some flexibility to maybe shift things over if this turned out to be more rewarding for you for points. Afterwards, you're going to score based on the plate and frame on top, possibly earning bonus points if you complete all of the frame's requirements. Keep in mind that you'll have a bonus tile on one of the bottom things down here. Once you're done, you'll move this aside, and then you're going to start again in a new round. Of course, that means doing a new draft of a frame and plate. Once you complete 3 rounds of this, add up all your points, add up the points as well now that you see all 3 frames, and you can see how many points you get from those bonuses, and you'll find out who has the most points and has won your game of printing press. Single player simple as you play against this automa. The way it works is you'll get your own drafting for frame and plate, and it's going to score using this little board here. Now, you're going to choose tiles randomly that match either the symbol, die color, or letter for these spaces. And for each round, this is the order of how it wants to pick things. So let's say when it's its turn to draft a card, there was something that had the red ink symbol. It will take it and add it to the farthest left column as it was its first pick. If there wasn't anything with that symbol, hopefully it could find something with a U symbol, in which it would put in the second pick, same thing for that. And if none of the cards match any of those 3 symbols, it'll add the card to the final column where it will also get an initiative cube. You'll complete that, adding cards to all the columns with it shifting its preferences each round. And at the end, it's going to add up based on the number of cards in each column. So 4 points for everyone in that one, 3 for that, 2 for that, 1 for that. There are also ways to increase the difficulty, such as flipping this board over where these have higher values, as well as a couple other rules to make it a bit more difficult for you. Now, printing press definitely falls under that style of gameplay where you are trying to make the most efficient pattern or layout in order to get the most points. This is not a mechanic that is strange to the world of tabletop gaming. That all said, I do think there are some small tweaks here that I really enjoy compared to some other ones. First, there's the fact that you're building 3 versus 1. Many of those other ones, you're building 1 large tableau. Here, you're building 3 small ones. That gives 2 advantages where 1, if you screw up, that doesn't ruin all your rounds. That just maybe you don't score as much during this round. Second, it makes a balance of scoring for that round versus the entire game. The frame and plate are really focused on just how you draft for that round. While the bottom bonus tiles that you'll be scoring and adding throughout the game, you'll be choosing which symbols you want to score for, are more about the whole end game picture, about what kind of symbols you want to double up on and try to get a bit more of in every frame. You can decide to try to go more in, though you won't get as much points if you place them on the same symbol, or divvy them out to a bunch of different ones, which could change which cards are most useful for you to draft, or maybe just gamble on and be like, all right, I'm going to go for the blue ink symbol, and hopefully I see a lot more blue ink ones when it comes to rounds 2 and 3. Next is how the actual layout of the cards and tiles are. Usually in a lot of those games that do this kind of pattern layout style, you'll have like, oh, the first one's free, you can lay them out as you want, but once you hit 5, because you're making a 5x5 square, or whatever the size the tableau is going to be, that's it. You can't do anything more from the side edges, meaning that if you accidentally hit one of those limits, it could screw you up and make things much harder, especially end game when you need to fit in those final few tiles or cards. Here, you can go whatever you want. You can even cover things if you wanted to. Really, there's all this flexibility. The only thing you need to worry about is the end when you have the frame. So you can choose wherever that 3x3 grid works best for you. This is great for 1, just takes a lot of pressure off, so you can just try and get those right symbols next to each other. 2, it works great for those initiative symbols printed on cards. In some other games, you might have to give up a spot you would score in order to get that initiative bonus. Here, you get the bonus as long as you see it. You only lose it once you do the final lock-in. And by then, you don't care. Maybe you've gotten that perfect 3x3 9 squares that you don't need that initiative symbol anymore. So it's going to be really helpful for you early on with the drafting. You can still put it on the edge, and you don't have to feel punished that you're giving up one of your bonus squares because of either the initiative symbol or even just some of the symbols you don't like. You can, once again, just make sure that that one symbol is on the outside with not caring about the other 2. It only matters what's in the frame. Then, of course, speaking of initiative, this is not, I think, when I compare it to other pattern laying games. In fact, initiatives in basically every game, technically. Turn order. Here, I really like how it works here because it is not simply just going 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we rotate, or it's not simply I just move up 2 ahead and now I'm going second. You all are drafting and could all be gaining cubes with a guarantee of an initiative increase to whoever picked last. This is fun because then you start thinking, all right, maybe I'm last here, but that's mostly because I'm tying on a lot of people's stuff. So when I get that one initiative at the end of this draft, that's going to push me up for the future drafts really well. And of course, depending on what other people pick and which cards they take, it's could be like, oh, well, I got this one. Oh, but you picked an initiative thing too, so you also went up. So there's a lot more shifting of who's going when, which is very important in any kind of drafting. In particular for this, it's less, you can hate drafting this, but it was more along the lines of if, let's say, I chose one of those bottom bonuses for, once again, the blue ink drop symbol, but also the player to my left also did that. Well, I'm going to start being more careful about trying to be higher initiative than that player because we have a rival bonus rather than just simply trying to be careful. I mean, always picking first would be great. So I really liked how all that works. There is, by the way, the bonuses and powers you have with your unique characters. They're one time, and I never felt any of them were too crazy, so they're just a nice little touch, but really it all came down to how you drafted and how you laid out the cards, which this seems to be designed in a way to make you always shifting how the draft works, as well as giving you that flexibility and leniency when it comes to actually laying them down and scoring your tableau. That all said, this all comes with a price. When I talked about, for example, how the initiative works and how it can change, and you're like, all right, now it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, that might sound a little clunky, and you're absolutely right. Clunky is definitely how I would describe this game. There are lots of itty little pieces that are going around and shifting. It's not mentally taxing in terms of gameplay. This is not your 6-hour-long heavy strategy game, but it is going to tax you in just making sure, like table space. You have to keep all your frames. So you have to slowly slide it over, make sure you don't mix it up. Each player is going to have 3 full frames once you're done. That's a lot of space. You have the little cubes going in and then returning at the end of each round. And then you have to add a little chip on top of the frame, but you're going to be adding the frame then on top of your card. So make sure that's tracking. Just a lot of weird small things that could go wrong. So you almost have to slow down because of that. Honestly, if this game had a digital version, this would go so smoothly. I could easily imagine you being on your phone and being able to choose which cards you want, placing them down wherever, clicking a tab to look at previous completed frames, and of course, easily seeing the initiative numbers for all the other players. But this is the physical version, and for now, this is going to be something, if you don't like a lot of fidgetiness and maybe just don't have the table space, that's something you're going to have to worry about here. Crits and misses for printing press. Crits. The way that you actually score your little tableau is much kinder in this game compared to others. The grid itself can be any size as you only determine your 3x3 grid at the end when you place your frame on top of your tableau. This means you can lay out your cards in much weirder ways. You don't have to be really worried about hitting those border spaces because it's the frame that covers it that matters, not the actual specific shape of your cards. Combine that with the way you can discard a card for some tiles. You get some starting tiles to begin with. There's a lot of flexibility in order to try to get the most points out of each round. I love how initiative works in this game. It's not static, nor is it if you increase your initiative, you just simply pick in front of the person in front of you. Whoever's picking last is guaranteed an increased initiative. That doesn't mean, though, that they're guaranteed to be picking in front of other players next drafting phase. Because some cards come with initiative symbols on them, people could pick those in order to try and secure their placement in drafting. So there are a lot of things to consider when you're choosing your cards, not just for points, but how to increase your initiative, maybe take advantage of how numbers work and you actually want to be last in order to get that initiative cube. It really made things a bit more fluid and interesting each time we started a new draft. Misses. While I did not find this game too taxing on the mind, I did find it a bit too taxing for the table. And by that, I mean there are just a lot of moving parts as well as just how much space it takes up. You need to keep all your completed frames as they will score you more points at the end of the game. And you have to slide them over basically very carefully, making sure not to screw things up and keep the frame as it was when you start a new round. Combine that with all the little cards, the cubes going in and out, the initiative shifting so much based on how much initiative value each player has. It's going to be one of those games that is slowed down just by all the little components and making sure that everything is being followed correctly. Before I continue, I should mention that this does come with a mini expansion for Gutenberg. I haven't played Gutenberg though, so I can't really comment on it, but it does just seem to be more components. So probably a just nice bonus for that game. This game, on the other hand, it's one I had a lot of fun with. I do really enjoy the mechanics in themselves. I like those tableau, building something on your own. And the fact you get to do it 3 times, I think is really nice. And I liked being able to choose where I wanted to place the frame at the end rather than thinking, all right, I have to plan out my 3x3 grid very early on. If I go out of that, I can be in trouble. I never really shifted my grid over, but honestly, if you started in one position, the way the cards came out looked better. If your 3x3 was maybe a little bit lower, you could do that too. That happened like once for me. Usually I knew where my grid was always going to be, but just that kind of flexibility was just really nice to me. And even though it's clunky, I do love the way the initiative track worked. I thought it was pretty fun. It always didn't feel like we went in the same order. It's interesting to see how that shifted and where that would leave certain players. But in the end, I also can't argue, once again, that it was really clunky. The game itself just has a ton of little itty bitty pieces that can sometimes be annoying. And by the way, the solo mode was perfectly fine. And I do like it because it's simple enough that I don't feel like I'm spending most of the time playing as the bot rather than how I'm going to score myself. And playing by yourself, you're not really having as much of that clunkiness because there's only one person. But this is still more enjoyable to see how everyone goes up, compare each other's scores. I just wish there was a way to streamline it. And as of right now, the only way I can think of doing that is a digital adaptation. So maybe in the future, after this review is released, there'll be one up there, be it on Board Game Arena or its own program. And if it is, I highly recommend picking up that because that is going to probably fix most of the problems that I have with this game right now. But you can let me know your thoughts on this game. If you played it, if you had a lot of fun, did you find it also as clunky as I did? I'd love to hear all your thoughts in the comments down below. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit review.